I grew up a good Christian boy who always took second helpings of his vegetables, knelt beside his bed each and every night to say his prayers, begging for God to make me stronger so that I could grow up to one day be a police officer. Ever since I could remember, that was all I'd ever aspired toward. I idolized those men who fought everything that went bump in the night. And at the ripe young age of 25, I'd finally achieved my dream. This story concerns my first and only overnight shift as a police officer in the Perkins County Barracks. The experience left me utterly jaded towards any sense of honor or justice residing in this age we live in. My shift began just as everyone was heading home and ended at the crack of dawn when Sheriff Lindlaker arrived. I'd never been left in the building by myself, let alone responsible for any prisoners and the countless possible catastrophes. Suffice it to say, I was more than a little nervous at the prospect. Luckily, my dim but experienced fellow officer Targoff sensed my apprehension and tried to placate me before the dreaded hour struck. He explained that everybody felt twitchy before their first overnight, but after an hour or so, it was actually quite peaceful. I thanked him for the encouraging words and moved over towards my superiors, Deputy Mahone and Sheriff Lindlaker, who were deep in conversation. Standing on the edge of their peripherals, I waited until the sheriff noticed me and coldly asked if he could help me. The annoyed air in his voice shuffled my thoughts like a game of 52 pickup. It wasn't until Deputy Mahone loudly cleared his throat that I found my tongue. Panicked, I asked several standard questions I knew on my first day. Lindlaker gave me short answers and turned to leave for the night. But before he opened the door, Lindlaker turned heel very sharply and sternly warned me to stay out of his office. I nodded, and after a moment of staring into my soul, Lindlaker made his way out the front door, off to his lonely trailer. A little while after everybody had left, I'd realized that Targoff was right for once. It was serene without the hustle and bustle. The prisoners were fast asleep, having been fed around 9. I spent the next several hours with my feet kicked up, nose deep in a smut novel one of the female deputies kept stashed in a broken locker. It wasn't until about 1 o'clock that I began to hear a slight rattling noise from the back room. Pretending it was nothing, I dug back into the paperback, which had just started to heat up. About 20 minutes passed and the sound re-echoed through the empty jailhouse, far more deliberately this time. I could no longer write the noise off as some rattling pipes. It had to be one of the prisoners, and my duty was to make sure nothing happened. Reluctantly, I rose and felt my way over towards the light switch. There was no result. I reached down for a flashlight and clicked it on. The beam aimed towards the door which led to the cells in the back area. As I entered, the light shone on all 4 inmates, and to my confusion, they were sleeping like kittens, each of them. I chalked it up as a mystery and began to turn back until the light shined on an empty cell that had a toilet seat tied to the bars with a sheet. After I saw this, there was a soft whimper, which took me a minute to realize had come from my own diaphragm. After several deep breaths, I moved towards the vacant cell, tugging on the knot that held the makeshift noose, and once again heard another louder whine from the shadows. This time, I was positive the noise had not come from me. Something was most definitely inside the room with me. Stricken, I moved toward the phantom noise, flashlight up on the hall, and I still saw nothing. I projected all the way to the brick wall and was relieved that there was indeed nothing, until I heard a moan from right behind me in the shadows. My bowels turned to ice. I mustered up enough of my mental fortitude and turned. What I saw still haunts my dreams to this day. I was face to face with the translucent, tortured face of an African-American man. His skin was pale gray. Eyes were bulging like a bullfrog, slowly reaching out towards me. Before any common sense had a chance to sink in, I blindly ran out of the room. Frantically crashed around until opening the first door I happened to cross. Frantically bolted into the office and barricaded myself inside by pushing the desk in front of the door. A small drawer fell out of the desk to the floor. Cracking out upon impact, it opened at my feet. Shining my light down, I noticed through the shards of wood a cassette. I don't know what came over me, but I needed to hear it. Looking at the desk, I saw a picture of a man and a woman who must have been his daughter. Realized it was Sheriff Linklater's office. His warning meant less than squat to me at this point. I found his stereo and loaded up the cassette. After a second, I realized that it was the voice of the sheriff himself on the tape. If you are listening, I'm either detained for a murder I did not commit, or dead. This is the only way I know that bigot little bastard will never be able to fully pin this on me. My daughter's fiancé did not walk out on her. He's dead. One night, Mahone and I were drinking, pushing each other's buttons per usual, and he gets on my case about my half-baked grandson. He knew it would get me steamed enough to go to that dark. Mahone found him, arrested him, and we brought him back to the barracks. Threw him in a cell and started putting the boots to him. Only as a lesson at first, but Mahone stormed out, and I figured that was it. But he comes back in with our toilet seats tied to a bed sheet. And before I knew it, was stringing the boy up with the damn toilet sheet and bed seats to the bars. The tape went silent. Clearly, I didn't have even half the story, but it was enough to know I had to get away from Linklater, and more importantly, Mahone. Once the sun began to rise, I moved the desk out of the way and exited the forbidden room. Waited at the front door until the sheriff showed up to inform him I would not be coming back.